I guess I should introduce myself, but as we introduce everybody, one of the three co-organizers, Nate Lewis. Let me just say a couple quick introductory remarks. First, this meeting is an experiment, right? I think it's an experiment for everybody. It's a format designed to not be formal presentations, but to have a lot more interaction. We will probably, either at lunch or later today, rearrange the furniture in the room so as to not have everybody facing front. Hang in there with us as we all do this experiment to try to get a lot of discussion, to bring out points of consensus and points of disagreement and record why there's disagreement, not settle it, but just bring those issues out onto the table. We have a broadly, incredibly sophisticated audience here, and I don't think we have to review kind of the very basic elementary things. We can, but most people, I believe, understand a lot of that. And it's the diversity of viewpoints that we want to really bring to the table. And most of the people in the room, actually, not all, I've had personally the ability to interact with before, and I know this is a very high-powered crowd, and it's quite amazing that we all actually are here for the week. So I think we all want to take advantage of that. What do we want to get out of this? I just want to have fun, learn something new. And I think if we all come with open minds and we not say, well, I want to just dismiss these other technologies because it's not my favorite, we don't get much out of this meeting, right? We get a lot more if we can collectively learn from what other people are thinking about and then try to assimilate that into some way of thinking. We'll talk more about the logistics and how we've organized this. It's essentially off-the-record Chatham House rules, with the exception of those cameras. Except with those cameras. We didn't know what to do about them. They insisted that they have them. They're there, but we cannot give permission for any and all of it to be released except for archival purposes. And that's probably the way a lot of this will come out. So don't be intimidated by that. I'll talk more about the framing of this meeting at 11 when I'm pinch hitting for Jane Long in the California Energy Futures Studies outcome, which several people in this room were part of. This is essentially a launching off point from that with different twists. The things that I think will come to the fore are what we'd like to focus on at this meeting is not on the things that we know how to do, but on the things that we don't know how to do, on the things that typically people put off to the end. Well, we can cut emissions by 70 or 80% if we do all this and this and this and if this and this and this policies, but don't ask me what we're going to do about aircraft or what we're going to do about ships or what we're going to do about heavy-duty trucks, because that's in the future. Well, the future is now for this meeting. Don't ask me what we're going to do about steel and cement, because that's in the future. That's now for this meeting. Don't ask me what we're going to do about compensating for storage for intermittency of renewables. In any energy system, when you have any degree of intermittency, somebody's going to have to find a way to make demand meet supply. How do you do that? There might be more things. We might take one of those off the table if we solve it somehow. But it's at least those three things that how do you not push off the last 20% of carbon emissions and discuss how you actually get to near zero is what's in the title, and that's what I think should be the focus of, and that was our thinking in putting together these people and topics to get a variety of not just energy systems people, but people with domain expertise in some of these areas who can bring us up to speed on what they're thinking about and what the problems are. Ken.
Talking about roles of people. And just to say, just a little bit more on framing of what we're doing here, that it's a lot of people are asked to talk about different specific technology areas, but some people have more broader systems level things or issues, say, with developing countries. And so just adapt. If you're not talking about a technology area, just adapt what I'm saying for that. The other thing is, necessarily just because many of us are Americans living here, there's kind of a US-centric focus here, but really our intent is to think at a global scale. And part of this idea of saying the last 20% is a framing issue, that if you think about that NREL report, they kind of assumed we had the fossil fuel infrastructure as backup. But if you're in a newly industrializing country and you don't have this fossil backup, what do you do there to make a near zero emission energy system? And so, and the other thing is also there's some people, like I think Per Peterson being one of them, kind of wanted to reject this initial framing of this 80% deep intermittent renewable penetration as a framing device. And if you want to reject that and say, well, really, the way nuclear would play a major role in a near zero emission economy is this, then you should just do that and don't feel sort of confined by our framing devices. So just to go through the roles of the different things. So this is experimental. We trying to break people out of their giving their normal PowerPoint talk and try to communicate directly, and by people speaking for relatively short amounts of time without PowerPoint, get people to really focus on the key points, which hopefully the rapporteurs will be recording. And so what we would like for people speaking on a technology area is to tell us, in that technology area, what do you see as the most promising particular technologies? And then if there are some things that have been getting sort of too much attention or overhyped, it's good to know about those too. And then really we should be focusing our discussion on the most promising technologies. There's not that much reason to spend lots of time talking about things that are never going to work. And then for these most promising technologies, we'd like to identify three things. One is, what are the barriers or the gotchas that are preventing larger scale deployment of this technology? And we're really focusing this meeting on technological researchable issues. And for almost everything, not having a carbon price is a huge and major barrier. So I think for the purposes of this meeting, assume that policies are in place that would incentivize deployment of low carbon emission technologies, and then what would allow one technology to compete in that marketplace with other technologies. And so, the gotcha we don't want to hear, that the main gotcha is not having a carbon price. So then for those barriers, some of those are going to pose tractable R&D questions, that there's something that you could do to help address or overcome those barriers. And so what are the actions that would need to be taken to reduce those barriers? And then, if you did take that action, what would the expected outcome be? So if you manage to come up with some other battery technology, and you overcome some, say, energy density barrier or something like that, what would that matter? Or would you just then run into another barrier and it wouldn't be helpful? So anyway, barriers, actions, outcomes. So again, speakers, 15 minutes, no PowerPoint. The facilitators, we've sort of randomly assigned 3 people to each, what's that? Oh, rapporteurs, sorry. Oh, so facilitators, right, are just the ones who are handling the discussion. And what we would like, first of all, is when people want to speak to put their cards up like this. And after the talks, we'd like to do sort of the discussion in 2 rounds. So first take informational questions, so that if people are confused or don't understand something, or there's some acronym used that nobody knows, that start off by just getting additional information from the speaker out to the audience. And then once we've kind of gotten that informational part out of it, then people should shift to the substantive discussion and back and forth. The rapporteurs, we've more or less randomly assigned 3 people for each section to act as rapporteurs, and really just to record what were the key points and the key pieces of discussion. And they will report back on Friday morning. And also they'll participate in some elicitation stuff, which Matt Shaner will describe. And that Friday, and ideas that will form the basis for what would be discussed in a paper to be written, which Steve Davis will discuss. So the audience, I guess your main role is to stay engaged and ask thoughtful questions and make thoughtful comments. The session chair's role is very easy. The session chair is just the timekeeper, basically, and so this is very easy. So I think that's enough for me, and we can move on to Steve Davis.
So I'm Steve Davis, and I'll be quick. So Ken mentioned this paper that we're thinking of being a more formal product of the meeting. Really, this meeting is in some way a legacy of a couple other Aspen meetings that have been held over the years, one in 1998 and another in 2002, both of which resulted in really high-profile sort of review papers, one in Nature and one in Science. So Marty Hoffert actually was part of those meetings. We'll be hearing from him in a minute. We can't promise that high profile of a paper coming out of this, of course, but that's sort of the goal. And the process that Ken described with the rapporteurs sort of collecting key points and reporting back on Friday, and the overall, the general structure of the meeting on the agenda will all feed into this paper and how we'll plan to organize that with small sections really focused on these different aspects. Also, I guess we mentioned briefly, Matt's going to talk about elicitations. Many of you have already completed the elicitation that we sent out prior to the meeting, and we're going to be doing those shorter versions every night this week, sort of asking questions about what you got out of the discussion this particular day, whether you were compelled by the points that you heard from the speaker, and that'll all hopefully both inform the discussion and how we're actually framing things, as well as maybe be incorporated into this review paper. So.